All right, we are live back again with our first panel discussion for today and for the conference Business.Digital.NOW. It's beyond exciting for me to present everyone here that we have gathered for this amazing 1 hour discussion. But before that, let me tell you what we are going to speak about basically. We have called this session Humans in the Digiverse, or the Future of Client Relationships. And in business, you often hear that there is nothing more important than the client, right? A lot of people say that, a lot of people would agree on that. And I think that's to a large extent true. And that's because, in fact, no business could thrive or exist without its precious clients. But the thing is that the world is moving very fast. It's changing, and the needs of our customers, the needs of humans are changing as well. People want easier, simpler, better way of doing things, of purchasing things, doing everything they do. They want it to be simpler and better. And it's inevitable for business-to-business relations to adapt to that, right? Because everyone is impacted from this digital renaissance that we have. And sometimes I think this might go pretty challenging, especially if you are, let's say, a larger organization and you need to adapt a lot of people to some new reality. And in this panel, we are meeting with people, with humans that I think all of you, to some extent or
I'm not sure if all they're humans. I'm not sure.
You might, yeah, you're astronauts.
Yeah. They're mega humans.
Yeah, ultra mega humans. But everyone here, I think, to some degree or other, is related to customers or customer experience. Some might be more in the operations part. Other people might be more really in, face-to-face conversations. But still, everybody here has great, tremendous experience in that sphere. So I'm beyond honored to present our panelists today, starting with the ladies. Let me first present Iliyana Stareva, who is the Chief of Staff to the EMEA President at ServiceNow, one of the top software companies, very popular name. She's going to share with us probably more about her work later in this session. Then we have Malvina EL-Sayegh, Sales Enablement Director at Reachdesk, a company that helps scale personalization, right, through direct mail, through gifting. You'll share more probably again later. Welcome, Malvina, to you too. Then we have Lazar Dzamic, a person with wearing a lot of hats, right? He's been former head of brand planning at Google Zoo, now a writer, lecturer, creative journalist, contributor to The Guardian. So welcome, Lazar, as well to this session. And then heading to Richard Wood from UK. He's managing director at Six&Flow, one of the most successful HubSpot agencies in Europe. So welcome, Richard, to you as well. And last but not least,
thanks for having me.
Thanks, Richard. Last but not least, the co-founder of Limocon, one of the hosts of the conference today, Ivan Bondokov.
Hi all. Really pleasure to have you all here. It's thrilling.
Good. So let's go to the first question. We said that the world today is highly digitalized. Sometimes even clients seem, let's say, hungry. They seem wanting many different things, different experiences. They want more human interaction, different human interaction. They want information to be personalized, to be catchy, happening right now. In order for this to be a reality, what digital technologies are you using personally in your everyday working environment? And do you think something is missing and needs to be built upon everything that we have right now? And let's start with maybe Malvina. Do you want to kick off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a great question. And maybe my point of view is going to be slightly biased, but I think if we look at the B2B space today, all of these channels, whether it's email, right, phone calls, LinkedIn, messages, they're all super, super saturated. And ultimately, I mean, if I look at my inbox, on a daily basis, I get so many emails, right? So many cold calls, maybe slightly less on the cold call side, but definitely a lot of emails. So I think the question that or the challenge that a lot of B2B companies are coming face to face with now is, how are we able to differentiate ourselves from everyone else who's doing the exactly the same thing, right? We're trying to break through the noise. We're trying to get in front of our prospects, get in front of our customers, have those meaningful conversations. But the truth is, it is very difficult to break through your inbox, right? It is really difficult to get you interested, get you wanting to have that next conversation. And maybe this is a little bit of a selfish plug, but you know, at Reachdesk, we're all about creating really memorable experiences, right? Creating those moments that matter for prospects and for customers. And one of the ways in which we do it is actually through direct mail and gifting, right? And it doesn't mean that the person has to claim your coffee voucher. If you send them a coffee voucher pre a demo conversation, or if you had a customer who maybe renewed with you for another year, you know, you can send them a customized bottle of champagne, right? And it's those moments when something like this lands in your inbox, it gives the feeling to the other person, oh my God, I'm special. You know, I received this. I haven't got this before. And this is exactly the response that we hear from our prospects and customers when they do receive something physical, right? Whether it's in the post or a gift card or something that's customized and branded, it shows that we're listening, that we care. And oftentimes it's not just a matter of sending them, you know, cupcakes, right? Or a bottle of whiskey or, I don't know, a nice summer bundle. We actually look really closely at LinkedIn. We look at Twitter. We look to see what your personal interests are as well, right? Because they often play such a big role in our decision-making process. So any kind of direct mail and gifting we're doing, it's always hyper-personalized. And the feedback has been tremendous. And so many companies are actually going in that direction now, seeing the success of that.
Just to like
jump in on Malvina, I think.
So like just to follow on from that, like I think one of the things that we see the most kind of traction and success with when like our client comms is like focusing on that stuff that historically doesn't scale. So like that personalization piece and things that make people go, wow, that was something different or outside of the loop. So that could be sending. So whenever we sign a new client, we send like a personalized thanks card from the person who sold it. And it sounds like a very small element, but it's personalized, it's handwritten, and it actually stands out from all of the other automated onboarding emails that say, okay, now send us this, now do this, let's take you through this process. And it's that almost like that pattern interrupt from what people are expecting. That's the stuff that has the most traction for us, which I think is very similar to what Malvina's saying.
And to both of your points, I think what's really key as well is to make sure you do it in the moment itself, right? I mean, people are nowadays very spontaneous, and when they're looking to solve a problem for them, they want it solved now. So you already have to rely on technology in one shape or form to make sure that you are there in that very moment, and you're not reaching out to them when they really don't want it. You are responding to their needs as they are rising, as they're happening. Because otherwise, you're not relevant.
It's relevant, contextual, and personal. They're the things that are like making this stuff really work now. I think that that mentioning that now piece, it used to be that our clients had an expectation that if they send us an email, potentially we'd get back to them within 24 hours, phone calls. There was like rules to how quickly people wanted you to respond to it. But now every channel, it's not just chat anymore. Every channel that they reach out to us, they expect some immediacy to it because they get immediacy from the other channels and other systems that they use. And that's the important thing that businesses need to be aware of now, is that expectation on the communication side.
And Richard, if you think about it, 70% of buyers now in the B2B space are millennials, right? That is the reality of it. We have this expectation. I order an Amazon package. I expect it to be delivered tomorrow. And if it doesn't arrive tomorrow, I am angry, right? And and a lot of these trends that we see in the B2C space in particular, they almost command how we do business in the B2B space, right? We want those personal moments. We want to be rewarded when things are going well. We do have this expectation that things are going to be done quickly. We don't want to feel like we're one of many. We want to feel like one, like unique, right? And if we rewind back maybe, 10 years ago when everyone was super heavy on automated emails, let's just enroll everyone in a cadence, 10 emails go out, same exact messaging, and we'll pray that someone will reply, right? And what we've seen is that doesn't work. You can't just spray and pray and hope that you're going to see the results. I think that has also been the biggest shift.
I agree. And also when we have when I have a problem, whether that's with a B2B company or B2C in whatever space, I want that problem solved now. And ideally I will self-solve for it. So I want the company to enable me to go ahead and do that, right? That's exactly what we do here at ServiceNow, essentially. But in a lot of situations, I will have to deal with a chatbot because I'll go to the website first. The chatbot can't help me. Then they'll try and connect me to an agent and I'll have to wait for a bunch of time to get that done. I wait there, then they also can't help me. Then they start a ticket, or they may send me to a phone line, and then I'm there waiting for I don't know, you're 19th the line. And by the time I solve my problem, I'm already I don't want to deal with this company at all. I'm already, but it is the reality because people are impatient. Consumers are impatient.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something that I think Lazar is speaking about is the paradigm or the concept about total customer experience or total experience management, right, Lazar? Can you elaborate a little bit on that part?
No problem whatsoever, but let me just kind of say first, I deliberately didn't want to jump in because I completely and utterly agree with what the rest of the speakers actually said, because everything today seems to be boiling down to two E's, right? Efficiency and empathy, right? So people want it fast, want it punctual, want it exactly the way they've kind of ordered, but also they would like a little bit of recognition, personal recognition, and that is kind of pushing us towards that kind of new big territory that we can call personal selling proposition, PSP. Give me something, particularly with the millennials, particularly with the younger generation, give me something that is exactly for me, not one size fits all. I can't agree more with everything that's been said, and also that phrase, moments that matter, that originated at Google, that I was kind of quite glad to hear, because today marketing in many ways, some people even call it moments marketing, the modern marketing. There is sort of nothing outside of it. So I completely and utterly agree. That's why I didn't want to comment on it. But total experience or customer experience management is kind of the new paradigm, the umbrella paradigm that is sort of trying to put under one roof many different kinds of experiences that different stakeholders or different audience groups that are touching the company, it could be an organization, doesn't have to be just a commercial company or a brand, simply we try to experience. That means different kinds of stakeholders, B2B, B2C, consumers and customers and clients, but also internal stakeholders such as employees, but also governments and corporate partners and various other stakeholders that we've got. Because in theory, at least, we would be expecting to see a consistent experience, meaning if it's one brand, it should be sort of a thread of steel going through everything that that brand is trying to be and the ways that that brand is actually trying to behave and talk about it. So, of course, there's going to be different propositions for different kinds of audiences, but still we would kind of expect to feel the same brand. And because of that recognition, the area, it's still new, I have to say, of so-called total experience or CXM, customer experience management, is rising, I would say, in the last few years. And even we see the new roles, such as Chief Experience Officer, being created. PricewaterhouseCoopers, for example, a few years ago has appointed one, and many other companies have appointed people who are sort of looking at those things. But as you can imagine, it's not a simple thing to deploy in practice. We have to connect all these different silos, break through so many different walls, that it's impossible kind of to do it sometimes. But you know what? Actually, more and more companies are realizing that this is one of the things that they need to start paying attention to.
I totally agree. And I think most companies, especially the ones that are in a growth phase or those that are hiring more and more people, because of internal complexities, you end up creating more and more roles to solve for a certain problem. And you're not really thinking about the experience that the customer is getting. So you end up having 20, 30 people who actually touch a customer throughout their life cycle with you, which is completely confusing and inefficient for a customer.
And if I can, sorry for jumping in, you just reminded me of one of my ex-clients in London, a big famous chain of supermarkets over there. I'm not going to mention names, although they're doing really well now. When we actually
you can mention anything here.
When we started doing, I developed the CRM program for them, basically for multi-year program for them. When we started working with them, their best customers, literally the best recency frequency value score, were getting more than 40 emails a month. Because 6 different departments in that supermarket were treating the same list as their own list. So basically, there was
abusing
6 customers in the company. Was actually exactly the same person, just 6 different departments, and it's, of course, it's unsustainable.
Yeah, and in relation to everything that you mentioned already, sometimes we tend to, like put a barrier. Let's say some things happen before COVID and some things are happening after COVID. And if we go relationships, do you think COVID influenced the way we are behaving with and as a whole treating our customers? And if yes, is that more on the positive side or more on the negative side? Let's elaborate on that. Maybe Richard can start here.
Yeah, I think like one of the biggest changes for us, and I think for most people in the ecosystem and kind of for businesses in general, and I think Lazar, you mentioned the word earlier, there's such a key focus on empathy now. So those who started to empathize with the customers, looking at what was happening for their customers, not just for them as a business, looking at what's happening for their teams, the people within those businesses as well. Those were the ones who not won out of COVID, but those are the ones who kind of succeeded in COVID and actually managed to adapt their businesses. And I think that's, for us, the biggest change with the companies that we work with. I'd like to think we always had empathy for our customers and the people we work with, but I think for the customers that we work with, there was such an expectation, and actually there's an expectation of empathy now, but I think at the beginning there was that people were surprised and delighted that we were kind of addressing what was going on for them with empathy. We were looking at ways that we could help, and often ways that we were helping that weren't of financial benefit to us or a benefit to us as a business. But there's a kind of long-lasting effect of that people remember that, and I think that is the biggest change that we saw with the way that we were communicating with our customers over COVID, and it had a huge impact for us before, like during and after.
I think also if we look at COVID, right?
Yeah, great.
COVID has completely changed the way in which we operate, right? We used to have face-to-face meetings. I personally can't imagine going back to pre-COVID times, right? I think we've gained so much efficiency actually, during the COVID phase, and we've all realized that, we can probably do our job just as well remotely. And yes, there are challenges, and yes, there are nuances, and yes, there are things that you have to adapt to. But if I look at our customer conversations, it's so easy, or it's easier now, to find that half an hour that works for everyone, jump on Zoom, discuss what has to be discussed, right? And kind of move to the next phase. And obviously for the seller, or for anyone working in the B2B space, or even B2C, right? When you have those interactions over Zoom, you have to realize that that person only sees a fraction of you, right? They don't see your whole self, right? Like how you communicate with the camera, how you make use of, if you do have a presentation deck, how do you utilize it in conversations in a way that it is engaging, because you don't have that person right in front of you. So you can't necessarily gauge their body language. Yes, you can gauge their reaction, but it forces you to be a little bit more attentive than when you were in person. Maybe that came easier when we were doing things face to face, but obviously over Zoom, there are those challenges. But I do think we have become more efficient. And I do think that a lot of businesses actually can't go back to the old way of doing things now. Fully.
I agree with everything you said, Malvina, and my job is all about being efficient. So I love Zoom and doing everything online and etc. And I think we've become very natural and very used to it now after over 2 years of COVID. But to add to that, we recently had our knowledge event, and we did that in The Hague here in the Netherlands, and we've got a few others in Las Vegas and so on. And I have to say, it was actually tremendous to see people face to face and get customers, doing events with you and doing conferences face to face and partners all together. You just can't beat the relationship building when it's face to face over Zoom. That long long-term relationship, the long-term growth, the long-term partnership, it has to have the face-to-face element. Although I completely agree with you that, Zoom and just doing things online and doing them now, it's just so much more efficient nowadays because companies have embraced that it is possible to get a lot done online and it doesn't have to be face-to-face. So I think we need to be mindful and just figure out what is the best way to balance both worlds moving forward.
Absolutely. If I can pick up on this one, just a quick interesting example how exactly what Iliyana was talking about is happening now. We had everybody here was using the out of office emails, but now actually it's becoming more of a practice, particularly London, New York, and similar markets, in the office emails, which means how the nature of the physical presence in the office actually is changing. Meaning now I can do the meetings and the functional stuff online. That's easy from home. But actually, when I'm in the office, I'm not replying to emails. I'm spending time creatively engaging with my colleagues, doing brainstorm, strategic thinking. I don't want to be disturbed, and a completely different way of using the time when I'm in the office.
Yeah, this is, if I may jump on here, it's really interesting because we are tending now to cherish more the physical relation and to be it's rare, and for people that are really passionate about their work, it's not about work-life balance, but this is something that is quite important nowadays. Okay, you can be with boxer shorts and a shirt and on a Zoom meeting. Not that I'm now with boxer shorts. I'm quite good dressed, but it's really interesting. And here, actually, when we follow the topic of our event, digital transformation, and I'm going to pick on a line that Dr. Marcel Vollmer was mentioning in his first presentation. It's really striking me that 84% of digital transformation processes do not succeed because companies are applying digital applications into old structures and outdated processes. And this is actually something very challenging for the companies, especially for the client-facing processes. What would you say about that when it comes to working with companies that are applying digital solutions? I don't know, someone can jump in right away.
If you don't mind. Sorry, go on, Richard. Sorry, were you saying something, Richard?
After you.
There's two things. One is the customer journey. We mentioned already for companies who do have a customer journey, because FMCG companies usually do not. It's an impulse kind of purchase. But almost every B2B company, many B2C companies do have it. And the question is whether the customer journey is mapped out. And the customer journey very often is the beginning of digital transformation, because you know exactly where your pain points are, what you need to transform in order to get what kind of results, and you can measure that in advance. So in that particular sense, mapping out the customer journey could be the beginning of the transformation, and then you've got the business case behind it to support it, and the incentive strategies for the teams to actually follow it. But the second thing is the culture, of course. Everything breaks down to the culture that eats the processes and the strategies and the good intentions for breakfast, as we know, right? And the culture is the most difficult thing to change, as we know, and that usually is the breakdown of everything else. As Professor Hofstede, who is one of the leading experts in culture, said, what is culture? It's the kind of set of artificial reflexes, simply things that we do without thinking, because that's how it's been done here. And that's quite difficult to change.
And sorry, I know, Richard, you wanted to say something, but maybe to add a third thing. I think a lot of companies actually don't focus on execution enough, because, you know, to change the culture and to drive a good customer experience, you do need proper tools. You do need proper technology, right? And often what happens is companies end up buying a bunch of tools that do not speak to each other. And so you end up at the same situation and most likely creating an even more confusing experience. And even for you internally, you just don't get the proper intelligence because these tools don't talk to each other. That's why, you know, I'm an ex-HubSpotter. It's all about the platform. You know, Richard will say that, and Ivan, you'll say it as well. And it's the same at ServiceNow, right? Like, we are a platform company, and so even though we have our own tools, and you may not be using all of them, but there are integrations and APIs. So you've got the underlying platform that can pull the data and pull the information so that the tools speak to each other. So essentially, you know, what you mentioned, Lazar, as an example, you don't have different departments emailing the same person, because you actually know that this is happening, so you can avoid it.
Yeah. And the platform also can block sending 40 emails to a person within a month. And this is the technology is there. And what I wanted to say, the technology is there, but the people are still. And I just want to ask you about that. Do you have the feeling? Sometimes I have the feeling that the client, and when I'm mentioning the client, I'm mentioning companies that are currently buying or implementing digital solutions. They're quite exhausted of catching up with everything that is coming on the market, and it's really hard to stop, to get strategic meeting to say, guys, we need to rethink our client journey. We need to get rid of those 2 tools. We need to implement those 3 into 1. We need to create another company culture. And how is this? I don't know. It's a paradox that we need to get free from, and I don't know how to advise companies on what they can do first when they are stuck up in this situation. Rich?
So like Lazar was saying before, with that like digital transformation piece, like it's important to look at the customer journey within that. And I totally agree. So when we start doing an implementation project for somebody, we get the stakeholders in the room across the different departments. So normally sales, marketing, ops, C-suite, whoever it might be, but the ones who are often going to have conflicting opinions, and also the ones who are going to need to use the system to do different things. We get them all in a room together. We go through that customer journey, and then we start to discuss the things that could be brought in from a technology perspective. So that's part of it. And we're focusing on that from an adoption piece so that by the time everybody leaves that room, everybody knows which direction we're pulling in. And there might be some people who feel hard done by on some level, but everybody has agreed when they're leaving that room which direction we're going to be moving in. So it starts to bring them on board like that. And I think coming back to your point, Ivan, we now do a lot of tech consolidation. So it comes back into that platform piece. So we use HubSpot. We can now stitch in a lot of different platforms into HubSpot. So we take a best of breed type mentality to it. So if HubSpot doesn't do it, we can stitch in the best tool to be able to do that into HubSpot. But we effectively give the team members using it a single platform that they can then adopt. So it becomes a lot easier for them. And that then feeds back through to that customer communication piece, because they're all using the same tool. They're all adopting the same tool. They're not using disparate tech across the system. So the end product in terms of the communication piece for that customer becomes far more concise and way slicker.
Yeah, totally agree.
And if I can add to that, right, I think when it comes to that type of change management programs, what's really important is that obviously you map out the customer journey, and you will define what do we have to do to go ahead and achieve all of this, tools we have to use, all the actions, etc. But oftentimes I see a lot of companies failing when it comes to execution, just because they create these massive lists of all the things we have to fix and have to do. So like prioritization is extremely important, and it just doesn't come naturally. So if you're going to change the way you work and the way you engage with customers, I always recommend start with one thing, do it really well. The rest is in the backlog, then go ahead and move on to that. But just naturally as human beings, we want to solve all the problems and solve them now. And it's just oftentimes just physically not possible. You don't have
competition is pressing us.
Yeah. So, the simplification is hugely important in today's world.
I can't agree more, but very, very often the prioritization, it's a very simple 2x2 kind of matrix. So on one side, you've got, when you have your pain points, but then you monetize actually how much money you're losing in each of them and the complexities. So how much money are you losing, less money, more money, how difficult is it to sort out, relatively simple, middle to more difficult. Yeah. You can immediately start prioritizing based on where you're losing a decent amount of money, and it's not very difficult to sort out. So you sort of have the map. Completely agree with Iliyana. Prioritization is a very important thing.
Well, that's like when we do like a big project, right? We'll often look at pilot teams or rolling out MVPs that focuses on a very small element. We get that up and running. We get the teams onboarded. We use that as a way to address the initial problems. So sometimes we'll refer to them as quick wins in the process. And then we'll use that as a basis to then say to the rest of the organization, here's why we're doing it. Here's the results from this. Look, it's not just theoretical. It's up, it's running, it's working. And then use that to then start to address the next in the prioritization list and just kind of chip away at that bit by bit.
I think it's also very important to look at, we talk about the customer journey and like what the buyer journey looks like and what that experience feels like. But if we're also talking about gaining efficiencies, that efficiency also has to be on the seller journey, right? the end user journey. And oftentimes we bring on these great pieces of tech and we realize, my gosh, we've just overcomplicated things, right? We've been doing one task, we've extended the amount of time it takes to do, you know, a simple task. So I think you really have to look at it from both sides. Is yes, that customer and buyer journey, absolutely very important, but also for that end user who's ultimately utilizing those half-eaten pizzas, right? Like all those tech that we have brought on board, how can we make them become more efficient so that they're not feeling overwhelmed, right? Because if you're going through a massive transformation, and we've had a situation like this recently, you know, we brought on 3-4 pieces of brand new technology in a very small space of time, that can be overwhelming. So it's also looking at the efficiencies for the end user and making sure that, hey, they're on board. One, they understand why we're doing this change from the end user, from their perspective, from the customer's perspective, and how this is going to change their workflow. I think if people aren't sure, or maybe they have questions, you know, what's going to change for me? What am I going to have to do differently? They're naturally going to become more resistant to change, right? And that becomes a problem. So how do we get everyone on board is definitely a big consideration throughout all of this.
I totally agree with you, Malvina, because oftentimes we talk about the customer experience, but at the end of the day, who is driving that customer experience? It's all the employees within the company. And so if their experience is crap, then it's just not going to work out externally. It goes hand in hand together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Malvina, I love that.
Agree with you.
Half-eaten pizza. I'm definitely using that
I
again.
recently had someone on the podcast, and she's responsible for, you know, digital transformations across big corporations, and she gave this analogy. So Stephanie, if you're listening, this is a little shout out to you. But she gave this analogy that back in the day, you know, the challenge was we don't have enough tech.
Yeah.
Now the challenge is we have way too much tech, and it's like half-eaten pizzas. You never finish one pie fully.
All right. I definitely agree with what you said. And we started speaking a lot about the topic of customer experience and buyer's journey. Let's look at it from the lens of B2C and B2B. Do we see any differences there? And how is that different? I think a lot of people start speaking about H2H, human-to-human relationships. So what's your point of view on that part? Who wants to jump here?
I'm happy to start off. I think a lot of the trends that we see in the B2B space are actually coming out from the B2C space. And I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, right, with our Amazon analogy and expecting things to be delivered very quickly, expecting instant results, right? Expecting almost like that instant gratification. A lot of the trends that we see in the B2C space, particularly because of who the end buyer is or who the end decision maker is now across B2B companies, I think we see a big shift going specifically to the B2B space. And again, it boils down to how can we stand out from the noise? How can we be unique? How can we differentiate ourselves? How can we give that end customer that incredible, you know, experience, right? And we do try to mimic what a lot of these great B2C companies have done extremely well, and ask ourselves, how can we implement it across our business?
I guess it's one of the benefits that's come out of COVID though, right? Is that B2B so like historically B2B organizations were slow, methodical. Yeah. They adopted tech like only after it was well tested and tried, and they often followed other organizations. Somebody had to move first and then everybody else would start to take it on. Whereas COVID, I think a lot of those like organizations that were selling in conferences, like hand to hand, that kind of stuff, all of a sudden they were like, shit, we can't do that anymore. We have to figure out ways that we can try and get back into these markets and approach people in new ways. So then all of a sudden, I mean, everybody on this call must have seen over COVID, you would have all of a sudden started seeing B2B ads in your Instagram feeds and on Facebook and places that you didn't normally get reached out to. Yeah. And all of these things are starting to be adopted more, and more organizations, even the B2B space, are adopting like WhatsApp messaging and things like that. Whereas historically, and voice notes, like I'm getting tons of voice notes and videos, and like all of this stuff is starting to happen now. And actually, I think in terms of certain elements, B2B is actually pushing more of the boundaries in that kind of human to human space than a lot of the B2C stuff. And I think there's been a bit of a shift since COVID to be more, it is a faster moving space than it used to be. And I think they are much more closely aligned. And it does come back to Malvina's point about it's the expectation. We expect to be sold to in a certain way, and we want things when we want them. And B2B's had to adapt.
Yeah, and just to add on to that point, Richard, I think what COVID has taught a lot of companies is that you have to be nimble and you have to be agile, right? What was the number one challenge when we all went remote? Well, how are we going to onboard people, right? How are we going to do trainings now? How are we going to give product trainings? Everyone was, panicking, and it was those companies that were nimble and agile that were able to adapt really quickly and actually not see this as a challenge, but hey, this is an opportunity for us maybe to reinvent ourselves a little bit, maybe to become more agile, become less rigid. I mean, everyone talks about it, right? You go to a big corporation, what's the number one thing that people say? Very bureaucratic, long processes, take ages to change something. And now in the B2B spaces, how can we be more nimble? How can we be more agile? How can we make decisions quicker, faster? And how can we also be more open to testing new things that, to your point, weren't tried by, dozens and dozens of companies in the past?
Absolutely. And just to support what Malvina and Richard was saying, I think we should be careful also, I mean, generally speaking, with using terminology. I think that that hard split between B2B and B2C is not really correct. Things are much more mixed than how we usually talk about them, simply because it depends on which particular part of the spectrum of the B2C and B2B somebody is, because there's a lot of overlap in between if we kind of take out the extreme cases, so on both sides. So for example, if a bank wants to sell mobile payment terminals to small businesses, there may be kind of tens of thousands of customers in one country of that particular kind. And frankly, in my experience, it's nothing different selling those kind of things than selling, let's say, consumer technology, selling holidays or financial services. You deploy exactly the same things that are usually considered B2C. So being nimble, being more agile, simply thinking in the way that kind of the other side of the spectrum is already thinking and doing is the key. But I think that space in the middle is much wider than how we usually perceive it.
And one last observation, what I'm seeing recently when it comes to B2B companies is that they're really trying to build a brand, like a memorable brand that is nimble, to all of your points. And that is also, when you see the name, you actually recognize them. They're starting to tell a lot more stories about the company, about the brand, typically how, usually in the past, a B2C company would do it. I'm seeing that happen now a lot more with B2C. With B2B, because they also want to be spotted somewhere when people are on vacation. Because at the end of the day, it's humans who buy the, the product or the service or the solution or whatever that is. So it's humans who make the decision. So they're trying to be almost like everywhere through ads and, billboards and all that kind of stuff like that. B2B usually, in the past was not part of, and they were just not doing it.
Yeah. It's great line that we're caught up here. And what we saw from our experience is something very interesting. Industrial manufacturing production companies, so B2B services companies, previously before COVID, it was like, okay, we can do business while visiting, some trade fairs, expos, conferences, going on meetings personally, traveling through planes, and just enjoying the life of being, mobile and going over countries and so. And when COVID struck, there was like, okay, now we need to go digital. Oh, wow, in this digital space is so much competition. What we've done so far, nothing. So it was a real period of time where companies that were performing normally quite good in revenue and in growth, they said, okay, now it's the time to slow down because we cannot do anything else. We have like problem with deliveries, with, supply chain stuff. So we cannot do our work normally, but we are pretty healthy enough to say, okay, in the next couple of months, we need to rethink our strategy. And that's where actually came what is Iliyana saying. Companies started to invest more in systematic marketing approach, in inbound marketing, in investing in branding and creating lots of interesting digital content, which previously was like, boy, what I need to create that? I need just a product presentation. I need a boot stamp in an expo, and I'm doing sales, and I'm pretty fine. And now this is changing, and it's actually very it's not challenging, it's shattering. It's actually something very frightening for some of those companies, and they need support. And what we want to achieve also with this conference is to say, okay, guys, there are lots of companies now, you know, like ServiceNow, like Six&Flow, and everyone else that can help you with this transition. But you need to say, okay, now I need to lose a little of momentum of getting revenue and getting new clients, and just think about me, my employees, the employee journey, not only the customer journey, but also the employee journey. What are they doing right? What tools are they using or not using? And this is something quite interesting that is happening since COVID now. And exactly, B2B is getting more B2C. So lots of technologies or tactics are used now in the B2B world. And what I want to ask you here is, do you see this moment where, because normally in B2B, what we've known so far before COVID was like the client, he's getting more educated through internet, and then when he wants actually to, when he's in some decision phase, he wants to be convinced of some product, then he wants to talk with somebody face to face. And we witness when we implement hyper-personalization, let's say software or platforms or tactics, that our B2B clients are just like getting more resistant. Say, okay, now we want to follow our clients. We want to know what they're clicking on our website. Well, that is frightening. I don't want to do that. Are you agreeing with me, or are you seeing more and more brave companies actually wanting to implement such technologies?
I think every single company throughout their journey there comes a point where they are going to have to reinvent themselves in a certain way, right? They're going to have to adapt with the environment, adapt to what's happening. And those companies that are able to do that are the ones that ultimately are the most successful, right? They look at what's happening in the environment and they say, look, these are the changes that we need to make. The ones that struggle are the ones that have maybe been doing something for the same way for 15, 20 years, and they're set in their ways, and they're not going to change, right? Those companies are not probably going to survive. And yes, we want to know intent data. We want to know if a prospect is clicking on our website. We want to know how much time they've spent looking at that brand new white paper that we've put together. You know, the figures could be quite scary because they're probably not spending as much time as we think reading that 5 or 10 pager, right? It's probably just a small fraction of time.
Yeah.
And, just because they go on your website and click on one link doesn't necessarily mean that that's intent and they're interested in buying your product, right? So I think you always have to take everything with a pinch of salt.
Fully agree. Fully agree. Yeah, somebody up to add something here?
Yeah, maybe just as we are approaching the end, but I want to ask you something else. Just in a little bit different direction. There are a lot of industries today that are trying out different approaches in order to attract and retain clients. But from your experience, do you have like an example, an industry, or maybe a group of companies, not the whole industry, that you think is like leading this movement around customer experience? Someone or some industry that's really showing great potential, and an industry that we can really learn from?
If I can start with a completely unusual angle on that, there's a big thing now happening in the West called inclusivity or open inclusivity. Which actually doesn't look at disabilities per se, but actually how non-typical people, how we call them very often over there, at least, can actually, we can serve them better. Believe it or not, in Britain at the moment, dyslexia is considered a skill, not a problem, and kind of ADHD and many kind of other of the non-typicalities are considered a particular skill. So you've got companies such as Open Inclusivity who are actually working with Google, working with Microsoft, who are usually Silicon Valley guys, are kind of ahead of everybody else in that regard. At Google, for example, 40% of the engineers are on the autistic spectrum, and they're deliberately recruited because of those particular skills and the ways how the brains work. So I would say one of the really cutting-edge approaches regarding customer experience, how to create products and services that are going to be accessible for everybody. Literally for everybody, how to have a bottle that can be opened with one hand, and other things. And this is kind of probably the ultimate frontier at the moment that we are looking at, you know, how to make the world a better place through service.
I totally agree with you, Lazar, and that's a bit of a selfish plug, but if we look at ServiceNow, we've got a 99% renewal rate purely because of how great the product is.
Great. So,
Rich, maybe?
I have, I mean, it might be a fairly slightly controversial kind of standpoint on this, but in the beginning, George, you introduced the kind of the session kind of implying or sort of saying that the customer is the most important thing to each of our businesses. We've actually built our business on the opposite model, and we build our business on a team first model. So like the most important aspect of our business is not the clients, it's the team that we've built. We spend a lot of time, effort and energy finding the right people, training them up, delivering the right people, and then finding the right clients to be serviced by them. So like we love our clients, don't get me wrong, and they are very, very important to our business, but actually hands down, our team is more important than any of the clients in our mix. And that is that's how we position our business. And actually we communicate that back to our clients. We hello. And we have and that's like we outwardly say that to our client. That's like we will say, like, we have built an amazing team here and they're incredibly important to us, and we are allowing you to work with them effectively. And what that gives our clients is the knowledge that they are working with a team that is engaged, they are well trained, they are well looked after, and they ultimately get a better service out of the back of that. So that's how we're trying to shift that mentality for the clients as well.
All right.
Totally correct. We have another speaker here, so I think Iliyana, I think she already used to attend meetings, right? So
yes, she is. That's kind of how you have to tackle your work-life balance when you have a 1.5-year-old.
Yeah. And also, Iliyana, this is the customer of the future we're going to be talking
exactly.
to.
Yes, she's learning from small. So
and she has a snack. She's my type of girl.
Yes.
Exactly. Great.
Maybe just one last question for everyone. We are focused on, at least for the conference, we are focused on how the future is going to look like, what digitalization is going to be in 10 years, in even in 30 years time, and so on. So if we have to again focus on the customer experience part, how do you imagine customer experience after a couple of years, let's say in 10 years time? What do you see? What do you think will be different, and what do you think will stay the same?
I think to Iliyana's point earlier, when we were talking about chatbots and getting frustrated when we first have to talk to a bot and then have to wait to talk to a human, right? I often get discouraged if I have to wait longer than 10 minutes. I'm like, forget it. I'm just going to do it on another day, and if that company probably heard me saying that, I'd be like, oh, really? We didn't realize it was so bad, right? So I think if I was to fast forward time, and AI and technology, it's playing such a big role in everything that we do. But just like when Siri started, she wasn't very good. Alexa now has gotten a lot better, right? Even my 6-year-old son can get his favorite song to play on Alexa at full volume. And it's, how do we make technology better? How do we make those chatbots more efficient? Do we keep the chatbots? Right? Do we find a different way of doing things? Maybe we use them just for a smaller fraction. But how do we work in a smarter way? How do we give that experience so that it still feels human to human? Because at the end of the day, all interactions, and this is to Lazar's point, right? B2B, B2C, it doesn't matter. It's all human to human. It's a person to person at the end of the day. We might think we're buying for a particular company, but I'm actually buying from that person, right? And if I'm buying it from them because I know, I like, and I trust them, They give me that confidence. They know what they're talking about. It doesn't matter what the name of the company is. It's always human to human. So how do we take AI? How do we take technology and still keep it human to human?
Amazing.
And I really want to be optimistic, but with the pace of technology, how things have changed over the last few years, I don't know, in 10 years, maybe we'll have robots doing a lot of things for us.
Yeah.
I highly expect that, right? And I think it's really up to us to be mindful and figure out how we're not going to lose that human-to-human interaction by letting technology solve a lot of things for us and do a lot of things for us. Because I only expect technology to keep changing and adapting and growing at a much faster pace than it has in just the last few years.
Iliyana, I also have kids. If I can have a robot to come in and do my cooking and cleaning.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah. I definitely need a robot
changing diapers, because I'm now on that level.
Yeah, that's
please.
That's the one. If I can jump in, I think that several things. We sort of see the trends now, but we don't know how they're exactly going to be playing in practice, but we can kind of see the trend. I have no doubt that the future is going to be much more automated in many ways, because capitalism drives towards efficiency, right? So it's going to be more automated. But how the roles of the automated systems may change. So we're going to see more empathic technologies, systems being able to read more than now the empathic information that we are pumping into the system through emojis, through language, and various kind of other things that we are actually giving away how we feel at particular situations. But also, so more empathy in the systems. But also, we will see, I guess, a lot of IA, intelligence augmented, which means using AI to augment human intelligence and kind of help us make better decisions. The role of the systems may change. The systems may give us information. It's very easy for chatbots to give us information. But actually, maybe the humans on the phone may talk to us in a calming way. Maybe they can provide empathy. Maybe they can provide even mindfulness moments for us when we call. And we have that examples from 1980s when first direct bank was launching on the phone. People were calling just to have a great chat, because particularly older people, because they were feeling more relaxed actually doing it that way with that particular brand. Very successfully for the brand, I have to say. And then I guess finally, with the relationship the nature of the messaging, the relationship may change. Products may start actually giving us the messages, and we may start engaging with products. So the car may say, hey boss, it's time for me for you to take me to the service, instead of a company sending me an email to say, dear customer, take your car to the service. It's almost like your pet talking to you and asking you, begging you to take it to the vet. So we'll be seeing all these kind of different things, but no doubt that some sort of a funny mix of automation and empathy is going to be playing out.
All right, Richard?
I think there's not a lot I can add off the back of that, but I think like the original question was around like how should we be kind of tracking and figuring out whether or not our customer service is working. And like the one stat that we focus, and it's in our kind of like our plans, or like our vision, or kind of board, or whatever you want to call it, is our customer referral rate. So like we want our customer, that's how we figure out we're doing a good job, is that our customers are then referring us on to other customers. And our goal as an agency is to get to the point where every other customer is coming from a referral. So if I can generate 50% of my business, I know we're doing an amazing job. And that's the one, like NPS has its place, CSATs have their place, all of those kind of like qualitative and quantitative data sets that you're pinging clients for, churn rate, all of that has its place. But the one that we really care about is that referral bit, is making sure that people like us, like the job that we're doing enough to actually recommend us into other people.
And Richard, isn't it funny how things turn around again? Because in the world of certainly running an agency business, when inbound marketing came around, and I was like, generate all your business inbound way, and now you're all turning back to referrals. So it's very funny to see how it's all shifting it again.
The good old referrals. George, if I may also add some thoughts.
Sure.
Yeah. For Richard now, currently, I'm pretty sure you know what is to consult on a CRM platform like HubSpot, a client that doesn't know anything about CRM. And once he gets, the full picture, he starts dreaming, suggesting, oh, we can do that, but can we do also that and that? And we're, yeah, actually you can do that with integration, with custom coding, with custom automation. Wow, amazing! I want to do this and this. So you know the hunger, you know, gets bigger with the meal. So what is happening is that there are no boundaries, and I think this is in some way quite inspiring, but in the other way is frightening, because I think in a couple of years, and maybe my vision is more drastic, but softwares like HubSpot will sell themselves. So AI will create everything from the content to connection with customers, to going on a demo sessions, to selling the softwares, to renewal. So this is maybe my frightening scenario that can happen as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that there is a new language of Google or something like that, that in the future, the developer as a profession will be obsolete, because everyone will be just writing down in a space of, you know, lines that I want an app that monitors my vegetable consumption. And this software will create just a personalized app right away. And then you can use it on your phone, on whatever device there will be in 10 years or something like that. So I think this is the time where we need to say, okay, guys, we need to be aware of what needs to stay human. And we saw lots of movies that AI goes out of hand and goes against the humanity. And this is something that we can witness maybe in the couple of decades coming. But I think, and that's why LimaCon was built on working with B2B clients, because I think B2B will stay longer human than B2C. And because these interactions there needs to, you know, there will be more human interactions that can stay longer and, you know, survive this AI revolution. But I hope at the end, humanity will be, you know, just some creative and collective mind that maintains and moderates and streamlines AI to do, you know, some repetitive tasks and jobs. And then we humans can go and meet on the beach, and our businesses can work for ourselves while we're drinking cocktails and not meeting online. So I hope this scenario will be the most positive one.
It's a good scenario. Sounds like less work and more fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's really inspiring, and it's an honor to have you and to be able to receive some of your collective and interesting creative minds. George?
I think a lot of food for thought in this 1 hour, a lot of insights that everyone provided, which I'm really thankful for. Hope we would see each other soon, maybe in this shape, maybe in some other shapes and forms, whoever knows. But really, it was a pleasure.
Maybe in the metaverse. We haven't touched on metaverse, but yeah, next time.
Yeah, but really.
Thank you guys for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you
so much. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye. Bye-bye.